Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Farmer, and this is the Evolution of Movie Show, but I am joined by Andy Rossi, who's just a normal ho-hum every single week, in and out host we have with us, but we also have special guest, Andre Welch, writer and director. We'll get into the movie itself, but writer and director here to join us. We have an actual professional on our hands here. Fellas, how you guys doing?
Thanks for that intro.
Sure. Yeah.
The last episode, I was like, Andy's amazing. And this episode, I was like, I see him all the time.
You again?
Well, I appreciate you guys being here. For those who are new to the show, the way it works is we watch movies and then we chat about them like it's a book club, but we call it the evolution of movies because we always pick a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we saw. So we started in 1990, then it went to 91, 92. Now we're all the way up in 2020. What a good year that was. That means next time we go to 2021, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's time to talk about 2020. A time when movie theaters, in air quotes, 2020, a time when movie theaters had movies like Tenet, The Way Back, and of course, Bill and Ted Face the Music. But we aren't talking about any of those. We're talking about Disrupted, a movie IMDb describes as an Oakland widower's thirst for justice is rekindled when a local killing is oddly similar to his wife's unsolved murder from decades ago. I had not seen this movie before this, but I saw the trailer. I was blown away by it. I was super excited to see it. Andre, for those who haven't put two and two together yet, you wrote and directed this movie. What was it like going back and watching it again?
So I actually, I have not watched it in about a year. I will confess. I did for the purpose of the show. I went back and kind of scrubbed through the file and was like, oh, yeah, that's right. This scene. And then that happens. Oh, yeah, okay, that's right. But I think because I also did a lot of the editing on the film, like I've just seen it so many times that once we kind of got it out there on VOD, I was like, enough. I'm just going to I need a break. so it's been about a year. So this will be interesting.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to ask you questions and chat all about it. But Andy, besides the obvious, of course, you know Andre, but why did you pick this movie outside of the obvious, you know Andre, and you want to get his movie on this hit show?
Well, yes. No, I saw Andre's movie. This is my third time seeing it. So the first time I saw it was for a private screening because I'm such a VIP over in Santa Monica. And I was, like you just said about the trailer, I was blown away. I was like, wow, he made a real movie. This is real. Wow. And it was so good. And that was in like I think that was one of your first screenings, Andre.
Yeah. I think it was the second one. That was actually not even total final cut. I think we still had like a couple of tweaks. Like it was like this last minute thing before festivals. So, yeah.
That makes sense because this time around, well, actually the second time I saw it was at Method Fest, which was really cool because Andre's movie was in a film festival that was on a parking garage that shot against a giant wall. So it was like a drive-in movie type of thing, just so they could do it during COVID. It was actually really cool.
It was at a mall in Sherman Oaks. I forgot what that mall is called. Fashion something.
Sounds right.
But I think it was on the roof of Macy's or something.
Well, the takeaway I had watching this, and we'll get into obviously bit by bit, is I forgot. Well, as I was watching this, I forgot that this wasn't a typical big budget movie. Like because I'll be honest, and again, I got to put it out there. Sometimes you hear about like an indie movie, right. And someone says you should watch this movie and you think it's going to be like filmed on an iPhone and a bunch of people speaking very wooden and a terrible script and all this other stuff. But I watched this, I got sucked into it, and it didn't feel like an indie movie for all the right reasons the whole time. Like it felt like I was watching a real movie. I never would have, if someone just said, check out this new movie on Amazon, I believe I watched on Amazon. I wouldn't have said to myself, oh, this is an indie movie. I would be like, oh, this is just a cool movie that's out on Amazon now. So I thought it was really, really well done. And as I said to you off the air, for all of our listeners and viewers, I was a little bummed out. I wanted to be able to come at you like a critic and be like, why is this happening? But no, I'm a shill. I'm like, this is great. I love it. Everyone should go see it. I feel like a late night host where I'm like, this is the best movie ever.
Right.
But speaking of all of our the people listening and viewing, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, thanks so much for watching and listening. Of course, I always got to ask, like, comment, share, subscribe, 5-star review. Leave us a little comment in the 5-star review too. I like to open it up and read it and go, oh, that was a nice little comment.
Yeah.
So do that. Why don't you? Get to it. What are you waiting for? Stop the movie, stop the show, go do that, and then come back.
Yeah.
But let's get into it. Let's talk about what I like to call the meat and potatoes, the actual movie. We start with the scene of a dead body and a man washing the blood from his hands. We hear this. The narrator tells us a story about a pit that killed Sammy. As he's doing this, he tries to Uber a racist woman as he continues to tell us that the pit killed a bunch of things and his mom lived with the regret of not warning people about the dog. Meanwhile, a venture capitalist is pitched drone security and invites the fellas up to Tahoe. Meanwhile, a guy who works at a store and a bar is a recovering alcoholic who has anger issues, and he puts in a long day's work while at the same time getting his hours cut. So we sort of get a quick glimpse into what will be sort of the main characters of this movie and what's going on. Andy, I want to talk with you. As this movie is starting and as you're watching it, tell us about the world as a viewer that you're perceiving that we're sort of stepping into.
It's so great. Yeah. I mean, you right away, you kind of like get the feels of this kind of gritty neighborhood. And I think, Andre, you filmed in the Oakland area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You definitely like feel like the characters feel very authentic and real. And like I already said the word gritty, but I love that feel. Like you're kind of tossed in right away. And you mentioned the racist woman that won't get in the Uber. I forgot about that part until this time watching. Yeah. And I was just kind of like, damn, she's just up, like just does that right to his face. It's just like, it's so crazy to me, but that's the world they're in. And that's why you kind of like feel for the Uber driver. Like you're kind of like, this poor guy has to deal with this crap every day.
Yeah, and Audrey, I want to kind of go to you here for constructing the movie. As I write these notes, when I go through this, I always make it a point. I write the notes as I'm watching, and I don't go back and change notes. And so, like, if I don't remember someone's name, I just say the guy. If I don't, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, like, I don't know the Uber driver's name, so I just say the Uber driver.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things I said in this opening part that I kind of changed my mind on because you find out more about certain characters and things. But talk about, like, as a writer, as a director, and setting the scene, you kind of have a lot to set here. You have 3 main characters here that we've got to tell us about without going too far into detail. What was that like constructing that opening segment?
Yeah, and by the way, your synopsis of the beginning is way better than anything I've ever said in any interview. That's like always the hardest thing for me.
Bring
like
Jack
my elevator
pitch
skills are so bad. Yeah, I think originally it was going to be mostly about Pete, who's the alcoholic man who we kind of learn more about later, who's kind of getting his life together. Then I started weaving in the psychopathic venture capitalists, just because those kind of characters are just fun to write. So I started writing more and more. And then the other character, the Uber driver, Jay, I started to kind of expand on his role because in the earlier drafts of the script, people were like, we want more of him. So so then it kind of became more of like this trio of storylines that all kind of unfold throughout the film, which is, I like the challenge of writing it. It's also slightly more difficult than just having one main protagonist. So there were times where I was kind of kicking myself for having so many characters, because you're like, how are we going to do this? But it's fun to shoot because you get a bigger variety of not just scenes, but locations and side characters, because each story thread has its own world. So
it is very cool too to have those three characters. They're so different, all three of these characters, and I wondered as a viewer, kind of, how are they going to come together? Because you kind of figure in these types of movies, like, yeah, they're probably going to somehow meet each other, or sometimes their storylines somehow going to meet. But I was like, especially in that beginning, you're kind of like, wow, these seem like three completely different characters. How are they going to come together? I thought that was really well done, especially in the beginning, to be like, okay, let's see where this goes.
And yeah, Andy, to your point, that was literally what I was going to say, is they're all so different and they're also very real, and you get such a good idea of all of them. Like the scene with the venture capitalist, you go, I get this guy. I mean, I didn't realize how far this character was going to go just yet, but you know, I get it. You get Pete, like this guy's struggling, working really hard, but you just already right off the bat, things aren't going to go his way in this movie for at least most of it. It's going to be a tough go. And then the Uber driver, you're like, what? I like it. It's kind of like a little tease. This is a character. We'll see how that plays out as well. So I do want to ask, you did mention something real quick, is you talk about how people wanted more of Jay, who was the Uber driver. What was it like as a writer and a director? You have your idea, and I'm sure you're like, this is a great script, and everyone's like, hey, we want more Jay. How does it like work as a writer where you have to go, maybe I have to change my vision to match what works better and like rearrange things? What was that like from the creative standpoint?
Well, for that particular character, it was easy because I've written a lot of roles for the actor, a friend of mine, Jelani Clanton. So I love writing dialogue for him. Like it's just fun. And he kind of knows, you know, what I want. So I was actually excited. I was like, cool, we're going to expand this. Everybody loves his part. I think I'd written like a monologue for him and in the first draft. And when my producers were reading it, I hadn't talked to him yet, and I had already started on the second draft, and they wanted me to trim it down. So I was like, I think I got to cut the monologue just because, you know, I'm trying to save time on the script. And they were like, no, you got to put it back. That's our favorite. So, nice. So I'm glad they dug it, because it's one of my favorite, you know, scenes in the movie. But it's the scene where he's kind of riffing in the Prius about.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
that was my favorite part too. But we'll get to that.
I do need to mention one thing. I noticed it more this time because I actually watched it at my house. You know, so you get able to see a little bit more than when I was at the drive-in. You know.
Oh yeah.
But Aaron Massey with a cameo.
Yeah, and you. And we should say Andy.
We'll get to that too. That definitely made it in the notes. So I want to talk, you know, beyond that, the venture capitalist, he has a stare down with some street toughs at a gas station, and one of them follows him and gets a brass knuckle beat down, Harold Price style. The other one of them gets the credit card he dropped and steals his identity. Meanwhile, Pete, on the other hand, has a dream in his gross apartment about his, what we find out is his wife and kid. And the building he lives in is getting sold, and now he's a homeless alcoholic. But he still makes time to see his daughter perform and get asked to sing in his daughter's wedding. And he tells her fiance that he's going to give him money, even though times are hard. This was a really perfect. It was a great, like, okay, we have the characters. Now we're going to up the ante a little bit. We find out that Harold Price is terrifying, by the way. The brass knuckle thing is just such a cool way to do things. But also, you get a little glimpse of Pete, that no matter how beat down things are, how bad things are, that apartment was just disgusting. That he has a heart and he wants to take care of his daughter, or at least be there for his daughter. And Andre, I want to talk to you about, or get your kind of view on building that character, that he's a tough guy, but you really tell us that he has a list of priorities and they are to be a better person.
Yeah. I think when I was writing Pete, originally I had him be kind of a tough guy, but he was like kind of a dick for most of the script. And then we were like, no, we got to tone it down and make him a little bit more like he's got his life back together and he's like repairing things with his daughter. So yeah, I wanted to show that he's just hanging on, really. Like he's had a really rough last 29, 30 years, whatever it was. since his wife's murder. And so he hit rock bottom. We hear about it 6 years earlier, and ends up going to prison for a while he's trying to find the killer, because he becomes kind of obsessed. So he's trying to just move on with his life, and so that's where the movie kind of takes place, with him seeming like things are going okay, but because of gentrification in San Francisco, he knows that this might kind of be the end of this chapter of his life. He might have to figure some other things out.
I loved the fact that he had that little bit of depth. You're right, because he was kind of a dick in some cases, but then he was nice in others. But that's a real thing, where like in the AA meeting where he's talking and he seems like a nice guy, but then after the AA meeting, he's like, "Shut up, guy who's running the AA meeting. Yeah, I'm gonna go work the bar. Leave me alone, you dick." Because that's realistic. You're nice in the group setting, and then when you're on your own, you're like, "Look, man, shut up." That's I thought that was a cool wrinkle in the character. I think it would have been very easy to just be like, "Yeah, he's always a good guy," but that made him feel a lot more real and made me believe a lot more of his past issues. Andy, I want to ask you, would you ever chase after a guy in a Tesla if he looked at you wrong?
Not a chance. No. And like you mentioned, the brass knuckles is so great. It's so like creepy and scary. Like where do you even buy brass knuckles? I don't think you get those on Amazon.
I think they're illegal in California. It might be legal in other states, but I actually rented them from a prop store, and I'm pretty sure they're real. So you can definitely get your hands on them somehow. I'm like,
Yeah, there was something, and I just, as a viewer, I want to talk to you about the brass knuckles, because I thought it was a very clever use of a weapon, because we've all seen movies where people use knives and guns or whatever, but there's something visceral about the brass knuckles, and still you're kind of still just using your bare hands for the most part. I mean, obviously the knuckles add a little bit to it, a lot of it to it, but it's like the fact that he's so close to it, I guess. I don't know if I'm really explaining it right, but Andy, how did you feel about that brass knuckle weapon as opposed to just being a murderer?
Well, when Harold first like shows up next to the car too, that I don't know how you shot that, Andre, but it's so great because the guy gets out of the car and he's like going towards the car, and then he looks in, he's not in there, and then it's like kind of like that horror movie, where it's just like you look and there he is, and then it's just the beat down of the century. I got to mention one line that I wrote down that I love this line, Andre. One of the other characters says to Pete, he says, "Hang in a barber shop, you bound to get a haircut." I think that's such a great line.
Great line. That's actually a friend of mine told me that is because he would go to AA meetings. So I kind of interviewed my friend about AA meetings and how they go, and then another one of his friends too who goes more frequently. So, but they said that that's a line that gets used frequently in meetings. So I was like, oh, I love that. That's great. So glad he came up with that. So
it was a very great quote that I could see myself stealing down the line. So FYI, if you hear me say it, just know I'm admitting I'm stealing.
I have one question too, Andre. Where did you shoot that scene where she's singing in the bar? Where was that at? Like did she actually go sing?
That was in LA in Redondo Beach.
Oh, no way.
Was it? Where was it in Redondo Beach? Like I live in Redondo Beach.
It was at a coffee shop. I'm trying to remember the name of it. On the main drag. God,
because I feel like I've been there, but I can't.
That's why I asked. I did look for, because I live over there too.
Yeah, you're in that area. Yeah, I'm sure you've been there. I'm blanking on the name of it.
No worries.
Yeah, I know we thanked them in the credits, so I'll have to check that out. But...
I'll have to go back and look. I was just looking for names I knew in the cast. I was like, I saw Aaron Massey too, who was on the show, friend of the show, Aaron Massey. Well, as we continue on, Harold Price doesn't seem that into his wife, who's having sex with him, and I can't blame him because he's watching Andy Rossi. Harold says that they can do anything we want in a way that implies he's crazy, while he talks about guns at a party, and he sees that his identity has been stolen, but he says it's okay. It gets his favorite. He goes and gets his favorite brass knuckles and goes and looks and to pick a fight. So he convinces the store owner to let him see the security tapes, and he finds the culprit of who stole his identity. Meanwhile, Pete meets his pre-prison friend who tells him that the knuckle dusters are killing people and says that it looks like the guy who killed Shari. Pete says, no, I don't want to go down this path again, but he takes the information anyways. This is cool because this is the moment where we start to realize, okay, these two are on a collision course somewhere down the line. And that to me is where the stakes really start to get going, because we know that we're building up to these two coming across each other. Andy, you were reading the news. What was it like researching this news story?
So funny. That's so the first day I ever met Andre, we were talking to him about Dead Body, and I was with Massey, and we went over to Andre's place, and he showed us the trailer. And that's when I was like, that was my first moment of going, wow, this guy makes real movies. Wow. Your trailer was great then. And then you needed us, you needed Aaron to pretend to fly a drone. And then you needed me to do a quick like green screen, which is in like your living room.
Yeah.
I just had to, I didn't know anything about the movie at the time, but
because I think the movie was pretty much picture locked at that point. We just needed me and the other editor, I think we had like blocked out the news footage, but we kind of had the scene already cut. We were like, okay, we'll just kind of cut to Andy whenever we can. So yeah, it was kind of like ready to rock.
I forgot about it as I'm watching. I heard because you hear my voice, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. But I love
this.
I love the choice either you or Jeffrey, who plays Harold, made with peeing off the balcony. I don't know why that's such a strong character trait to me. Like, who does that?
Pissing on the world.
Yeah,
so great.
It is a great visual of Andre, great point. Pissing on the world, because that's kind of what he does. He just sort of and the whole stigma of being a venture capitalist to boot. But you say who does that, Andy? I feel like if I had a balcony at some point it would happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A couple of beers. Yeah. It's happening.
Yeah, it would happen at some point. Andre, I want to talk to you about dialogue, because this was another great dialogue moment. And for me, it was in the party when Harold talks about guns and how people are always just looking for the excuse to use one. Now that is a very, I love the dialogue. This was one of my favorite scenes as well. What's it like writing dialogue that can be kind of politically fueled as well? Like, that's probably going to get some politically fueled response beyond just the movie. What's that process like?
Well, yeah, I always try to look at things from different perspectives. Like, like for me growing up in Oakland, when I thought of guns, it would make me think of gangster guys doing crimes. Like the first time I saw a gun that wasn't like, oh, that's my uncle's gun from World War or whatever, I saw a guy put a Beretta in his pocket when I was 10, when I was walking to a bus stop from a movie theater. I was like, that guy's doing something.
Yeah.
But then if you're growing up on a farm in Oklahoma and you have guns, it's like, it's totally, your view of guns is totally different because you're not, in that same kind of environment. So you wouldn't be using guns for the same reason. And then I think there's people who own guns for a totally different reason, if it's for protection. But I think there's some people that are a little bit more like, I got an arsenal of guns. I want somebody to come here and try to rob me and see what happens. Like, I think they don't really want that, because I think things can go wrong, obviously.
Yeah, right.
You might think you're tough because you have all these guns until a real criminal comes in and just shoots you in the face, and then that's it. Right. But I think there are a lot of people that do have that viewpoint. So to me, if it's writing a psychopathic character who clearly is not afraid of really anybody, I think for him it's like this almost like a game for him. So when he kind of says that to the people at the party, it's one of his only moments of truth in the movie where he's just kind of being honest.
Right.
And they're all like nervously laughing, you know, because I think in real life, if somebody said that, everybody's like, okay, all right.
Well, it plays, and Andy, I know you want to say something. But if I can jump in real quick, it plays so much to that moment as well, because one, he that literally just happened with him and the guy at the gas station. Someone gave him a reason to use the brass knuckles. And that's kind of what he was looking for, you realize. By the way, I love that he got wine at the gas station and then said he got it from France. But
right. It's a $3 bottle of wine.
That was a great little twist. But then also, as he's saying that, he's getting the alerts saying that someone stole his identity that he's approving. Because again, you can tell he's like, I want you to give me a reason. I want you to give me a reason to come after you. And I thought that was just really well played in this scene. It all went together. Again,
and Jeff,
I'm gushing about this movie.
Oh, well, Jeff Lower, I mean, he to me performed the character better than anything I imagined in my head. Like, I think we auditioned 65 people for that role.
Ooh.
So he just like nailed it in the audition in person. I think we did like 25 in person. And we kind of all knew, we're like, he's the guy, because he's just so understated the way he does it. And he's still, you know, totally calm and friendly. And, you know, so there's just something a little bit creepy about, and he's the nicest guy in person.
Yeah.
But the way he would do all these scenes was just like, So it's just really interesting. So yeah, not even that much direction on my part. I think he just brought his own flavor to it.
Yeah, he's so good. I was just going to mention the one scene that just every time makes me laugh is when he goes through that kind of monologue, and then that I'm not sure who plays that, the other actor that says like, "We're going down a rabbit hole." Like,
oh yeah,
I just love that, because I think that's such a great response. I think if I was at a party, and just like, I think he says something about like, this is amazing, or whatever the line is. I just think that's me if I'm in a scene with this. Or not in a scene, if I'm in real life with this guy that's
with a
going
psycho
on this
like that,
crazy talk, I'd be like, it looks like we're going down a rabbit
hole. He's like, this wine is pretty good. We're going down a rabbit hole. Yeah. Chris Coppola, he played that role.
He's so funny.
Yeah, he's hilarious.
Yeah, very, very fun. That was one of my favorite scenes though.
Yeah.
But also again, we kind of learned a little bit more about Pete and his background, and that he. Now we know that he's looking. He didn't say he's going to be looking, but we know he's looking. As we continue on, we see more of the backstory for Pete as he remembers his wife. He sees someone else got knuckle dusted on TV, and now, or not on TV. He sees there's the store owner got knuckle dusted, and now he's on the case. And all while he can't find an apartment, and his car dies, so he gets Ubered. And and it's the guy from earlier, and they decide to pick up a friend, and they rob Pete. The woman in the beginning was right. She shouldn't have gotten in the car. We get another flashback to Pete as a kid when his wife left him because of the substance abuse problems. Harold's wife catches him with the cards getting used on these purchases at strip clubs, and he continues to lie about it. And if anything, gets the idea to buy a GPS tracker. This is kind of where the story continues to get a little bit more tangled. We see a little bit more information. I'll be honest, I had not put it all together what exactly happened just yet, but I'm getting more information about the backstory of Pete here. And again, like I said, the Uber driver was a criminal. I should have called the lady a racist. She was right. She called it like she saw it. She was right.
She had a bad feeling. Yeah.
I felt so betrayed. I was like, Story, you made me judge this woman incorrectly. But what a great twist here. Andy, I want to, as a viewer watching this, how cool was it to see Pete and Jay finally meet? Because this is kind of a movie about a lot of people who aren't connected, but they are very closely connected, finally coming together.
Yeah, and I love Jay and Prez. They're so good together, talking about heavy metal music, and I think later on they're talking about Dave Matthews, which just makes me laugh.
We get that a little bit later.
But yeah, no, you know what's one thing that I caught this time that I really liked is when Pete takes an Uber. He doesn't know what Uber is. It's like his first Uber. He gets in the front seat. I don't know why. I thought that was funny, because I was just thinking, I've been in a lot of Ubers. I've never once sat in the front.
Yeah,
you know, you just
I did my first time.
Like, you did.
And I think it was because I was with one other person, and it was a smaller car, and I'm 6'4", so I was like, front, I leg room. But the Uber driver looked at me crazy. So yeah, we did that on purpose in the film.
I thought that was just like a nice, fun moment because I was like, yeah, that makes sense for Pete to just be in the front seat.
Yeah, it was a very fun interaction, and also the robbery of Pete was very interesting the way it happened because Jay and Prez, they were jerks robbing a guy, but they were kind of likable at the same time. It was this very well acted scene where I'm supposed to hate them because they betrayed my trust. They got me to like them in the beginning. They betrayed that. Now they're robbing Pete, but they're still kind of cool in some way. And so even though it's kind of a stretch when they're like, hey, we can help you find one of the names on this list, you're like, yeah, I could kind of see them continuing to use this and do this stuff. And this also, and Andre, I want to talk about the lies of Harold. He continues to let this lie go. I thought for sure he was just going to say, oh, sorry, my car was stolen, I'll deal with it. But he just accepts it. He says,
which is so scary for him to keep accepting the charges. Makes me more scared of him.
Yeah. He wants to follow the trail, basically. So it's all just kind of fun times for him.
I mean, Andre, writing this character, it's got to be so hard to write a character like Harold, where I'm sure the easy thing would be for him just be full crazy and full just like, I'm just going to kill everybody, whatever. But you have to, in a way, as a writer and a director, have him continue to press the, for lack of a better term, the craziness, but still remain calm and believable on the outside. How do you balance those two things? That just blows my mind as a creator.
Yeah, I think for his character, my main takeaway was when you're wealthy and kind of a wealthy middle-aged white guy, with the Tesla, who's a venture capitalist and this and that, you're probably not going to be suspected as much. So you can just get away with more stuff. I always think back to the Dave Chappelle stand-up bit he did like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where he's like, yeah, I was riding around with my friend Chip, and he was like going too fast and this and that. And this cop pulls him over and is like, you know what you were doing? He's like, sorry, officer, I didn't know I couldn't do that. And then he just like got let off, with a warning. He's like, how the hell? Like, I could never do that. So that was always kind of my inspiration for that character was not that it came from that bit, but I always kept that Dave Chappelle bit in mind when I was writing for him, that he's just like, yeah, I can just get away with anything I want because nobody thinks I'm doing anything wrong. So he's never really worried about it. And just doing research, like he's not a serial killer per se. He's a high functioning psychopath, which I think there's it's something like 2% of the world's population are psychopaths, but most of them aren't violent. They're high functioning and but psychopaths are very good at manipulating situations. They're good at, they can, basically pretend to be emotional about things without being emotional, by just copying what they've seen before. So, so I just kind of kept a lot of that in mind, that he's playing it to a T, just knowing how you're supposed to act in most situations, obviously until the end.
Yeah. He does such a great job too, of like talking to his wife too. Like he just like you said, he seems like a guy that you're like, oh, he's probably just some kind of like rich guy. But like, I would never be like, oh, there's that rich guy that also is murdering people on the side. Like his dialogue, like with his wife and stuff, you're like, oh, this is just some guy. I've seen this guy with a lot of money, driving around in Tesla. But he's
like relatively unassuming. Like we always had him wear a t-shirt, for every day. And I think like, of course, we didn't have much of a wardrobe budget. So I was like, okay, we'll start with like a lighter t-shirt and it'll get darker as the movie goes.
Oh, yeah.
Like little things like that. Because we just were like, okay, what would Harold wear? Like, yeah, I think he just wears like a jacket and a t-shirt. Like he's not a flashy rich guy. Like he's much more of more understated. So,
which is that kind of venture capitalist look, the understated look. So it fits that as well. But what this movie does well is there's so many things. My biggest pet peeve in movies is when, or in any type of storytelling, is when you give me little breadcrumbs and then they don't go anywhere. Where this movie, so many little things happen that do lead to something else. And so like the GPS tracker, when he gets the GPS tracker, you're like, why is he getting a GPS tracker? You know, that doesn't make sense. Or like the drone guys in the beginning, like it all kind of plays together and it's so cool. But I want to continue on to our favorite scene, and I'm going to let Andy, will have you unpack it first. But Pete and his new friends go to find one of the names on the list. Well, they start by picking up Sherm, who was Harold's ID thief. The heist goes wrong, and the car won't start. Sherm doesn't make it, but he reveals the brass knuckle baddie drives a Tesla. Speaking of Harold, he follows the breadcrumbs to a strip club and finds Sherm's car and puts the GPS tracker on it. Pete offers to get rid of the car, and the two seem to be on a collision course. Andy, you alluded to it a little bit ago. We talked about it in the beginning. My favorite scene of the movie, the monologue, where they talk about why they listen to heavy metal music. Break it down for us.
Oh, I mean, I just wanted to applaud it. It's so great. Yeah, I mean, and it all like makes sense. Like even them just talking about the type of car. Do they? I could be confusing it with Curb Your Enthusiasm, but do they talk about like wearing glasses or just like the wardrobe or something that he wears?
I think he does mention a little bit like got me some thick rim glasses, got some hipster clothes,
tight pants, yeah,
tight pants.
and then that they started to like the heavy metal music. I think it's funny.
Well, it was cool because it was like at first it was almost a mocking thing, but then he found the appreciation of certain things along the way. Right. Andre, this is definitely the question I want to ask you. What's it like writing these characters where you're kind of now talking about race issues and things like that? Is that uncomfortable, or is that just like, hey, I'm a creator, let it go? Do you check with people like, hey, can we write this? Like, what's that like? What's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, growing up in Oakland, like I had friends from all different backgrounds, you know, since I was a kid. Most of my friends in my neighborhood were Black growing up. So, you know, like, yeah, I played basketball. I think I was one of two white guys on the team. So like, I'm very comfortable, you know, talking about all kinds of different stuff about race. And what I've noticed throughout my lifetime in general, it's just general, not everybody, but I would say white people are probably the least comfortable talking about race. And usually I find myself talking about race way more with my friends that aren't white. So, so usually if I'm writing stuff like that, like I definitely have them read it, you know, since they're two Black characters. And, you know, obviously curious what they think, but usually like they end up really liking, a lot of what I'm writing. And so it is collaborative. Like they will do, a fair amount of improv, especially Jelani, who plays Jay. So, you know, I have it written, I have the main bullet points of what I'm talking about, but he's so good at improv that he'll do it differently on every take. So he'll have, like, we probably did, I don't know, 8-9 takes of his monologue, and each one's a little different. It has like, I mean, you could make the scene 10 minutes long because he had so much good stuff, but it was like, we can't use all of it. So yeah, a lot of the really like funny, little bits are like from him, you know, like he's just great at improv. So
I love his, I know this white boy didn't just die in my car.
Well, if speaking of improv, if I could just tack onto that, is as a director and an editor, I mean, obviously improv when it's good is good, but is there ever times when you're like, dude, I got to go through your 15 different takes and figure out what the right one is? You know what I mean? Is there a party that's like, just read the lines, or do you like that? Like, how do you balance that? Because I mean, if he's good at it, it's good, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who try to improv and you're like, man, just stick to the script.
Yeah. It really depends on the actor for sure. There's some actors that they'll just, another really good actor at it, Daniel Roebuck, who plays the ex-cop. It's not that he did a lot of improv, but he'll put things in his own words. And again, it's just like, oh, this is great. This is so much better than what I wrote. So yeah, I think it's just some actors are just really good at doing it on the fly. And I find that especially I like to shoot handheld, so I like to just keep things more loose. The performance a lot of times will feel a little more realistic and authentic when it's improv, if they're comfortable doing it. But then there's other actors that just aren't comfortable doing improv, and when they try it, you're like, ooh. Or it's just like, it's just rambling, it's just too long, and then you're like, where do we cut? Especially if you're if you're shooting at single camera instead of 2 or 3 cameras. So it can be pretty challenging. So really, actors that I tend to cast, like, I mentioned before, Jelani, I've worked with him so many times that just going into that role, we kind of knew that he had plenty of room to play with it. And then there's some scenes where he just, read the lines, but yeah, it's definitely varies actor to actor for sure.
I have and Andy, I have a question for you in a second, but I want to just piggyback one last time on the, you talk about the handheld and the loose cameras. Something I find as a viewer, and I've never directed a movie. I've never, I don't know anything about that. So this is purely as a viewer. I do find that those like handhelds where it feels, I would call it shaky, but it feels, to Andy's point, gritty. And I feel a little bit more in it as opposed to watching it. Is that the reason you go that route? Do you just think it's easier? Like why do you prefer the handheld versus a set hard cam, I guess? I don't know if that's the right terminology, but
static or dolly. Yeah. It depends on the movie. I think for this film, at least we shot it out of order because of, budget reasons, which most movies are shot that way. But I wanted to ramp up the handheld as the movie went along, so it becomes a little bit more intimate and intense. But I think my original thought was the Pete storyline is more gritty because of where he lives, and he's in this old beat up apartment and this and that. So I shot most of his stuff handheld. And then Harold, he had this kind of more pristine lifestyle. So I tried to shoot most of it on a tripod or a dolly or a slider or whatever. But you run into moments where you just don't have time. So you have we're renting out a location and you only have 2 hours and you're like, okay, we got to get through this scene and we have 3 pages to shoot or whatever. So you just don't have time to do every little dolly shot, even though they're gorgeous shots, unless you do it in a oneer or something like that, which, sometimes people will do that, but I like to have coverage. So I make sure that I get as many angles as I can. And sometimes handheld is just faster. I mean, so I'll admit that.
No, it came out great. Andy, this is where I want to talk to you, because this is where the story progresses to what I would consider for me, the real, I don't know the word I would use, but this is where, when we see that the GPS tracker is on Sherm's car and Pete says, I'm going to go get Sherm's car. This is like this is like when a big fight is announced. We're waiting for Mayweather versus Pacquiao. We're waiting for it, but then it's announced, like, oh, it's going to happen. Yeah. This was the moment, like, oh, it's happening. This is going to go down. Sunday. They're on the collision course. Tell us about kind of where you're at as a viewer when you realize that it's about to go down.
It's about to go down. One character, Andre mentioned Daniel Roebuck. He's so good in it. Yeah, he's such a good actor. But Sherm, Drew, right? Drew Seeley. He's so good as that character as well. I was actually sad when he died, because I don't know. I thought he was like a fun character to play with Pete in the back seat there.
Yeah.
But that whole, all that stuff, where they go to the house and the car doesn't start, and then Sherm gets shot. I feel like it's just like all this stuff that we've seen that we're getting introduced to. It's now, like Jack said, it's really coming to this like extreme like chaos. Like you're just like, man, this is about to get crazy. And it's just such a great job of storytelling where you're getting everybody is kind of like coming together. Because as a viewer, the beginning of the film, you really like the 3 kind of main characters we talked about. But at least as a viewer, I'm like, how is this going to come together? And then like this does so organically, but in such a way as an audience member, you're really psyched. You're like, oh, here we go. It's go time, like Jack said. So
yeah, for sure. That's been, you know, I think that was the biggest challenge in writing the script, and also just hearing not even negative feedback from people, but just like a general comment is that, you know, the first act, maybe into the beginning of the second act, like it's just, there's just a lot to set up, and then it slowly, you know, kind of comes together, and then it like really ramps up. My friend Mitch would always say that, like, the way I write is kind of like a Deftones song, where it's like, you know, like he sings and it's like, and it's kind of quiet, and then it's like, ah! So I like music that kind of crescendos, which is why I, you know, or we'll probably talk about it later, but my bit about Dave Matthews in there, but yeah, it's writing 3 storylines. That's just like the challenge, is like, because you only have so many minutes of an audience's attention to make them care about these characters, but not like go too far into making them care, because you need the story to keep like moving, you know, like the main plot to move. So that was challenging.
2 things that this brought up to me as we were talking about this, I thought was really cool, is there were so many moments in the convenience store, not to circle back too far, but and it makes you think about all these unrelated characters that are kind of related. And it makes you think, like, I go to the same gas station all the time, for instance, and it makes you think, like, how many people, what kind of people am I interacting with day to day that I don't realize I'm interacting with? And also, like, I think I saw somewhere, no one is innocent in this movie. Every single person, you start with they all seem likable, they all seem like good people, but then you just find out they all have these dark sides to them, and it's very cool. Like, as dark as some of them, like Dave Matthews even. No, I have nothing against Dave Matthews, but so Pete, he takes the Sherm's car to his cop buddy's house, and they find the tracker on the car. The cop friend says they have drone footage of the Fred Ross murder, but Harold is there. He kills the cop friend and the wife. Pete tries drinking again and decides to lure Harold to him with the tracker, but it's Pete's daughter Harold finds. The other robbers decide to head to Lake Tahoe. This, I don't know if I'd call it an all hope is lost moment. I guess maybe it is, but one, I wanted to say the cop friend dying to me felt like one of the, I don't know how to say this, and Andy, I'll let you talk about it as a viewer. He felt like it. Some movies have like an untouchable, someone, you know, like you feel like they're not going to die, they're fine. Right. Like, things are bad, but this person's safe, they're going to be okay. So when he didn't get knuckle dusted, he got the throat slit. Along with the wife, it felt like, oh my gosh, you broke the rules. He wasn't supposed to die. He was supposed to be safe. How did you feel when Harold Price came in and did his dirty work?
Shit's getting real, man. Like, yeah, no, it makes you just more scared of Harold. Like, he's like an unstoppable force at that time. I was surprised too. Yeah, especially it's so gruesome, and Andre could probably talk more about it, but shout out to, I think, Nick, who worked on Dead Body as well. The makeup and like the blood, and it's so like gross in like the best way. It's just like, it's very like with the store owner of the liquor store, you kind of like, man, he really, like, Harold doesn't just shoot you, he destroys your face.
Yeah, Harold is very anti-gun, I would say.
Well,
but yeah, we find out later, maybe not 100%. He goes over the top with it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, because that was interesting. Something that I took away from the cop being murdered and his wife was they had their throat slit, which was out of character in some ways for Harold. He didn't hit him with the brass. Was there a reason for the difference, or was it just felt more natural because that was the situation he was in?
Yeah, I remember going back and forth about it when we were writing the script, and I think the idea was, if it's brass knuckles, it's just too loud. It's just, you can't really have that element of surprise. And then if Pete's there and also his wife's there, and it's like 3-on-1, then it's like this martial arts thing, and I'm like, I don't like doing that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
And it's just, you know, I think the idea too was like, well, Jack is this ex-cop, like he's definitely packing, like he's got guns in the house. And so then we thought, you know, a knife is more quiet. And
it's a creepy knife too.
It's a very
not a knife
creepy
expert,
knife.
but
and that's a very sharp, dangerous knife too.
Yeah,
we were very careful with that knife. Again, a rented at a prop house, but my actually my editor on this film, he's a martial arts expert, and I guess his friend is a weapons expert, and he was like, "Oh wow, they use one of those. Those are like hardcore." I was like, "Oh, didn't know that."
It's dulled down.
Yeah, it was dulled down, but it still is. It's a scary knife for sure.
Yeah. I was gonna say it actually kind of led to more believability for me though, because something that I at least I took away from as a viewer is the other people he killed were the people who sort of crossed him, the people that he wanted to kill. Where it felt like with Jack, his wife, it was a necessity. It wasn't because they crossed him. It wasn't because he wanted to. It was like, they're on to me and I need
it's preservation. Yeah. And that's actually talking about that. That's totally what my composer was saying when we were figuring out the music for it. He was like, I feel like this scene is more like a horror film. It more feels like a not like literally a horror film, but more that vibe. Like it's just more creepy and kind of slashery, scary. So he went for this more like horror kind of vibe with the music, which I really liked. So
it definitely does, I think, give like horror vibes there.
Yeah.
The one scene I wanted to talk about, Jack, did we get to the part yet where the daughter meets Harold?
So yeah, we haven't seen what really happens, but we have seen that they met outside and she asked him for a cigarette.
That scene is so terrifying. You shouldn't smoke. It's bad for you. It's just like, oh my God, she's meeting him. It's so scary. And Andre, I really want you to talk about that scene and how you shot it, because I think I know it was they weren't there, right? They weren't
there. They never met.
Oh really? Yeah, oh my God, that's such crazy movie.
The actors never met until we screened it in LA when Andy was there.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who helped me do locations. We actually shot the daughter's part in Redondo Beach and then Harold's part in San Francisco. And then just kind of camera magic, just kind of cut it together.
I tried to pay attention this time around too, to see if I'm going to be able to tell, but no.
Yeah.
Wow, I never would have guessed. Like, totally.
Especially such an intense scene too.
It's an intense scene. Yeah. No, some of that I think we shot the stuff in San Francisco. I think it was like 3-4 in the morning. We had shot all day. We were so tired, and it was the last thing to shoot before Jeff had to get on a plane and fly back to LA. And it was this foggy, kind of creepy night. And so we were kind of like, hopefully we don't get robbed while we're shooting, because there's only 3 of us shooting that part. But he just kind of did some improv, and I think he did a little bit about the smoking. It's dangerous and this and that. And I was like, oh, that's so good. So yeah, a lot of that was just improv at 3:30 in the morning.
So there are certain moments in movies too. This was done very well, because certain moments in movies, I say to myself, don't you dare. And like, it'll be a lot of times where like an animal might get hurt. I'm like, don't you dare hurt, like, do not hurt the animal or whatever it is. And when he was talking to the daughter, I was like, oh, for some reason, I was like, don't you dare. She's off limits. You're not allowed. Don't do this. Don't do this. I will flip the table.
Yeah, she's been so nice, like the whole movie, her and the fiance.
She's the one good person.
Yeah, she is. No, I was like, no, not her.
Yeah, she and the fiance.
He's been through too much. Don't do this.
Yeah.
So to Andy's point, very tense. And and the fact that you didn't give it away was a great, like, because now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, oh, she better be okay somewhere.
Especially, like, I think it's such a great thing to do as a filmmaker is you kind of put it in the viewer's head of like, I'm thinking what could happen to this daughter, and you're thinking the worst because you just saw Harold just knife these people, or at least beat people with brass knuckles. You're like, oh man, she's dead. She's got this wedding coming up. Like it's just like so much.
And then it's just Pete sitting in the mountains.
Right. Well, I mean, that kind of takes us to the end there. So we get the last part of the story from young Pete, where he finds his wife who's been killed, and you kind of figure out why it is sort of his fault, because he antagonized Harold, not knowing who Harold was, but he antagonized him, and then they switched who was driving the car. I thought that was a really well played moment there. But Pete wakes up on a trunk in Tahoe. He puts it together that the credit card is owned by the guy that killed his wife. Harold finds out that the guys are in the Tahoe cabin, and he gives Pete's wife's ring to his own wife, implying that Natalie had been brassed. The fellas relax in a hot tub and take a poop as Harold shows up and goes all Punisher on Prez. Pete and Jay go back to the house, and Jay gets knocked out. That leaves it to just Pete and Harold, and all between the two is revealed as Pete kills Harold's wife, and it just deflates Pete. Then there's a fight, and Pete's on the losing end when Jay comes back and saves the day like a reverse version of a horror movie villain. We end with Jay giving an envelope to Natalie's fiance and explains that he was the one that put down the pit bull, as he decides to listen to something a little more mellow, maybe a little Dave Matthews Band.
Which, if I had the rights to that music, I totally would have used it.
Yeah. So this was such a good ending. It was a kind of a big chunk I put in there, but Andy, again, as a viewer, I want to talk to you and get your thoughts on how Harold gave his wife's ring, or Harold gave Pete's wife's ring to his own wife as a gift. And
so low down,
all of that, and kind of the reveal of what's happened between them, and that dialogue after his wife's throat was slit, and he's like, "Don't you feel deflated?" Oh, I died for Pete. I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh my gosh!
Harold doesn't miss. He just, nothing gets this guy. Anyways, go talk about it, Andy.
No. I mean, yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's so that all that stuff is so great. Like, they're at his place, and like, again, Harold, kind of like he was confident before in accepting the charges. He knows they're there. He knows they're coming. He's ready for him. Just that confidence in like a villain is so scary to me. And like, we still don't know what happened to the daughter, so that's why, you know, Pete, as we're watching the story, we want him to stick around so we can figure out what happens to his daughter and stuff. But poor Prez. Poor Prez.
I know. Nobody wanted to see Prez go. But we're like, if he's going to go out that way, like, he's got to go out in a way that's got to have something to do with beet juice. That was my my main thing. The beet juice has to have another, part of the movie.
Was there a story behind the beet juice, by the way? Or just
no? I just thought
to add in.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. Like, we had more scenes talking about beet juice and them going on a juice cleanse. They all got cut out of the movie because it was just too long. But I wrote a whole bit for that. But we had to change some stuff. Actually, the Tahoe stuff was the most challenging for me to shoot because we had the fewest amount of days to do it. It was bordering between rain and snow, so it was just like miserably cold, but not quite snowing. And shooting outside, so it was that was tricky. But also the geography of the cabin that we ended up getting wasn't really, the same as in the script. And so we had to change a lot of things in the cabin, certain rooms that we could shoot in, other rooms we couldn't. So we had to kind of change things on the fly. So it was definitely a really challenging 3 days shooting in Tahoe. It was intense.
Yeah. So. I mean, I'm surprised you did that in 3 days. One thing I did want to ask you too was the dialogue that Prez and Jay talk about. They're talking about white people and doing hot air balloons and wine tasting. I just thought that was so funny. And then I think it's Jay that says, like, well, not all white people. Look at Pete over here.
Yeah.
He's not doing any of that shit.
Look at loser
he ain't doing
Pete.
Shit. Yeah.
But that hat you guys put on Pete too is so great. It's just such like a silly, like, I don't know, just fit Pete perfect.
I think for wardrobe, I went to H&M. And I was just like, whatever's hipstery right now that looks like a 17-year-old kid would wear. And I just bought it all. And then we were like, the hat, that's going to work for Pete.
Yeah.
So.
I love the hot air balloon reference because I never thought about it. But then when they said it, I was like, yeah, that is a white person too, isn't it?
There's certain things that pretty much only white people do. There's some exceptions, but yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think he had a bit about eating a hot dog with sauerkraut. I can't remember if that made the movie. Is it in it? Does he say that?
So.
I don't think
okay,
so.
we may have cut it because it was too goofy, but I thought it was so funny. And that was actually Aku's line, the actor who played Prez. He had a bunch of really funny improv. But again, when you're editing, it's like this fine line of like, we don't want to go too goofy because it's kind of the serious moment with Pete. Mm-hmm. And if you go too far, then it takes you out of it. Mm-hmm. But then I'd like to have some humor because I don't want it to be too one note and too serious the whole time.
Yeah, when after Harold's wife is killed, I thought the way that went down was one of like the post murder. Obviously, the build up to it was tense, but the post murder where Harold does the 29 years and that's all you got. That's it. Like knowing, like it was such a cool way to make me feel. I felt the deflated feeling for Pete, but also I loved how Harold said, "Well, we can't go back now. This is what we're doing. This is going to be the fight." And the fight that happens, you had mentioned kung fu earlier. What I loved about this fight is it felt realistic. It didn't feel like suddenly they were, martial artists or like they had suddenly knew how to fight. But they also didn't look completely incapable and ridiculous either. It looked like real people who, we're going to throw some fists and hope it works out.
Right.
Tell me about, like, was that an improv thing with the, like, now don't you feel deflated? Was that like a vibe you wanted from that? Tell me about that scene, because that was very different than what you see in most movies like this.
Yeah, that was all written. I think that was all written. I don't think there was any improv. And credit to Jeff Lower, who played Harold. I think he did it in 2 takes, and it was like he just nailed it. And we were really pressed for time. I think Marie had to catch a flight, so we quickly did her death with the blood and got a couple angles, and she had to take a shower and take off to Reno Airport. So then, yeah, I remember just shooting the monologue with Jeff, and he just like nailed it. And it was like, yeah, just two takes. It was amazing. And then the fight scene was really challenging though, because I didn't even really have time to prep them on it. I was pretty worried, like, how are we going to do this? Because I had some ideas. Like we didn't want to go the martial arts route and have it be too choreographed, but we needed some kind of plan, and I didn't have time. So Jeff Lower and Ron Kale, whenever they weren't shooting with me, they were rehearsing and choreographing their own fight scene.
That's great.
Oh, very cool.
So it's all them. And kudos to Ron too, who played Pete. He had a hip injury. He was going to get a hip replacement. He was waiting to finish shooting the movie.
Oh, wow.
So he got his hip replacement a couple months after we shot that scene. And so he was in a ton of pain, and that made it extra difficult to shoot a fight scene because he's like, every time, like, anything like that. So we had to be pretty careful with that for obvious reasons, for his own health, but also even just for finishing shooting the film. It's like, all right, like if Ron's hip gives out, I don't know, we're going to finish shooting the movie. So we had to really take that into consideration. So it's all them. They rehearsed it. They had it down. As far as I know, no injuries. They were totally safe about it. So it was all them. I was like, thank you guys. So
I had a very high and a very low at the end here, where the first was the low. Andy, I want to get your thoughts as a viewer. When Harold reveals that Pete's daughter traded him the ring for a cigarette, of all things, just really well done to just show how little she thinks of her dad and the ring and all of it, that she traded it for a cigarette. I was like, oh man, that's a low. But then Andy, also, when Jay comes back, guns a-blazing like a hero, rising like a phoenix from the ashes. Like I said, he was like a reverse version of a horror movie villain that keeps coming back. He comes back, but he saves the day. I popped off out of my couch. I was like, yeah.
I forgot that happened. I knew something happened, but I think that would be like, that's the moment I want to be in the theater where everybody goes, yeah, I'll cheer for him jumping out.
Yes, that was just a phenomenal spot, and so I loved it. This was, like I said, so much of it paid off, even the story with the pit bull, and you can kind of see the analogy of the characters within the movie being a part of it. And there's kind of a happy ending where Natalie's fiance gets the envelope. And like I said, Jay mellows out with some Dave Matthews at the end.
I like that song at the end, whatever song that is. That's a cool track.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that band. It's some French band, but even though it's nothing like Dave Matthews, it just kind of fit the vibe. It was like, okay, instead of listening to metal, Jay's, maybe progressing with his life, and he's listening to something more mellow.
I even like his Band-Aid placement at the end. I don't know why. It's just like
that was all me. So I did not have Nick for any of that. So I was like, I hope this comes out okay. Like, just
it seems
most
like
of the makeup is Nick, but yeah.
Well, I would think, I mean, Jay he's not a doctor.
Like, he's not a doctor.
He's not going to go to a hospital, I don't think. He probably did it himself. He's probably like, I'll just put some Band-Aids on this. Yeah.
And by then, it's supposed to be like a month-ish later or something like that. So I was like, okay, the wound would have somewhat healed. So it wouldn't be this like, super gashed up face anymore. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth with me and a couple of the actors that are very into continuity of that. Well, wouldn't it be? I'm like, okay, but
I mean, it's one of those things where I appreciate continuity, but at the same time too, it looks cool. Like,
for sure. Yeah.
And I don't think any of us really know what your face would look like if you got hit with some brass knuckles a bunch of times.
I know. That's a very good question. Because he does get pummeled, but it's kind of in the dark and you don't really know. I mean, you see his face when it's revealed, but obviously his brains didn't spill out like in the liquor store. So not that bad, but
for Mr. Wong. Was it Mr. Wong?
Mr. Wong, yeah.
He was so nice too.
I felt really bad for him too. I was like, oh, Mr. Wong.
I know.
He's been in that town for 40 years. Come on.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of wraps up the movie. I was really blown away by this movie. I thought it was really well done. And again, I'm not just saying that because you're on the show. I told you I wanted to come at you with some hard hitting questions. Like,
I was ready for it, man.
Like, how dare you do this silly scene? But I was like, no, this all checks out.
This movie sucks.
Cross reference.
Let me tell you why.
I wanted to say defend yourself, but there's nothing to defend. I guess it all came out really, really good.
It's crazy too. Like, this is like Andre literally shot this like fairly much just him. Like, I know you had obviously some people helping, but like even just shooting it, directing it, writing it, and then like I think Andre, correct me if I'm wrong, but you helped a little. Didn't you do a little sound too, like a little?
A bunch of the scenes didn't have. Well, we never had a pro sound guy on it, so hopefully the sound sounds okay. We had a pro sound mixer do the mix, but my co-producer Jeff Gadigan also held the boom, so he has sound equipment, but he's not like a pro by trade. But a lot of days he couldn't make it, and so it was just me. It was like,
just
all right,
tape the boom to your arm.
I just like kind of there's a couple times where I literally held the camera and the boom like this, like it was like like a Rambo movie kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, it must be like a shoulder workout, I imagine. It's arm workout.
It's not a good idea. I don't recommend doing it, but there was a couple times I had to do it. C-Stan, set up the boom. A lot of stuff. There's a lot of car scenes. I don't recommend writing tons of car scenes. They're a pain in the ass to shoot. And a lot of them I just was by myself, or there's not even enough room for me to be in there. So I'm literally duct taping the mic to something, or I think I propped the camera on. Yeah, I gaff taped the camera on a couple things and just praying that nobody stops fast and the camera flies off. So
yeah, you do have a lot of cars, different vehicles in this movie.
Way too many, and you don't really, you're writing these scenes and you're like, oh yeah, they're in the car, because people talk in cars all the time, but once you're shooting it, you're like, fuck,
yeah.
Why did we do this?
So. Well, the car is such a natural place to have a conversation.
It is,
because you're stuck there, and you know, what else are you going to do, as opposed to, especially in this day and age, you don't necessarily go out to like a bar to have a conversation that often,
right?
Like
Not
at
really.
least these kind of conversations, you know, you don't say, let's go to a public place and talk about a heist. You say, let's get into a car where no one can hear us.
And cars just look cool on film too. And, you know, and obviously if you're shooting at night, you can play up, like we literally were doing loops around the strip clubs in San Francisco. Which is another funny story. They actually got pulled over by a cop, ironically, while we were shooting that scene. The Prius thing actually didn't work in real life. But,
I love this movie. Like I said, Andy, I want to know you as a viewer. Any final thoughts on this one? Any kind of takeaways or any last thoughts on how this movie played out or what you took away from it?
Well, for me, I mean, like I said, this is my third time watching, and like I mean, obviously I knew Andre super talented already, but seeing this, it's unbelievable. Like if people listening haven't watched it, check it out. Because I think it's got everything, you know, it's got action. It's got, for me, I'm huge into characters. And, you know, that's why, like I mentioned, like the little things some of the characters are doing, even Pete sitting in the front seat of the Uber. I just love like little, you know, choices that actors or characters make. And this does a really great job of doing that and keeps you on your toes the whole time. Like, I'm not sure exactly the running time, but for me, you're in it the whole time. There's not one time where I'm like, man, this is taking a while, or like something happens, or there's a scene that you're like, I don't know why they put that in there. It's all very nicely structured and written and shot really well. So if you like really well written and well shot movies, check this one out.
Yeah, it's and like I said, you talk about being in it. I love the fact I've said before, it doesn't feel like there's wasted scenes or scenes, like there's no scene or moment where I was like, yeah, you didn't really need that. You could have even things like showing Pete as a younger man who played music at bars and things, but he got kicked out. And they didn't like him, but his daughter is successful, but she wants him to sing, but he's uncomfortable about it. But it also plays in the fact that he works at a bar now and he's getting kicked out of the bar now. Like it all sort of, a lot of the stuff plays together and it makes kind of a deeper, more enriching story, I thought. Andre, now you made the movie. Was there any, we'll think of this as a post-mortem, I guess, real quick. Any kind of key takeaways or things that as a filmmaker you took away from it that maybe you want to add going forward, or like, oh, you already said no more cars, but like anything like going forward, like, man, this was a key takeaway or something, just making the movie in the process of that.
Yeah. I think I wrote too many speaking roles, and even though it's fine, there's a reason why most movies that are like under $5 million, they'll just have a certain amount of locations and characters. It's because you can actually pull it off without going insane. I made it, I think in retrospect, it was difficult because we shot in LA, Oakland, San Francisco, and Tahoe, and most of the actors were LA based, but some were Bay Area based. So sometimes I had to fly Bay Area based actors to LA and vice versa. So logistics are incredibly important when you're putting together a movie, and I didn't really take a lot of that into account when doing this movie. I was like, figure it out. So I think going forward, I won't do that again, or I'll do less of it. I'll say that. But I think a lot of times, you know, if you're working on a shoestring budget, you got to do what you got to do to make it happen.
So your next movie is going to all take place in one living room.
Yeah.
With one actor.
It's with one actor in a closet.
Yes.
One guy's trapped. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I am not the guy who can pull that off. No. I do not know how to do movies. I like to be outside in the real world and show stuff. Yeah. I kind of like don't. I actually am in awe of people that can pull off movies like that, because I can't. I couldn't do it. So
yeah, I love the way it's shot too. Even like all like the drones and stuff, like it really does a great job of like showing the neighborhood and like getting like, you know, I love that, like being able to see, like being outside and seeing the different locations. For me as a viewer, it's more fun than like if you're just in a house the whole time.
Yeah.
Right.
Showing the geography and stuff. Yeah.
Right. So we like to wrap up with a fun little game. Andy, I don't know if you're ready for it, though.
I am.
You are? All right. So, Andre, and for anyone who's new to the show, we always end the movie with a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Can Andy Rossi connect someone in 6 moves to Kevin Bacon? And so
we can.
That's tough.
Andy,
I'm sure Andy could do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
So Daniel Roebuck has been in like 300 movies or like 200 movies. He's got a ton of credits. One of those credits is The Fugitive. And in The Fugitive, believe it or not, Julianne Moore is in The Fugitive. And Julianne Moore is in Crazy Stupid Love with Kevin Bacon.
Wow. Did it
Just
again.
like that. So
Just
easy.
like that.
Wow.
What are these? We might have to knock this down to like 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon, because you're getting too good at this, Andy.
Yeah, no, that one was fun. That one was less moves than I expected.
Yeah.
Andre, typically it comes down to the movie Sleepers with Kevin Bacon.
Oh yeah, there's
so many people in that movie.
Yeah.
So I was looking to try to do that.
How do you connect it back to Sleepers?
that should be the game. No, I wanted to mention Andre's daughters in the movie, and I just wanted to give her a shout.
Yes, yeah.
Odette is the baby.
Oh, really? Very cool.
And now she's 4 years old, so you can
already got an IMDb credit.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, so that does it for us on this episode. Our next episode will be the last one of this year, this season 1 of Evolution of Movies. We're going to talk about the 2021 movie that a lot of people are talking about as the award-winning frontrunner, King Richard, starring Will Smith. Excited for that one, but that does it for us. But before we sign off, I'm Real Jack Farmer. You can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. Andy Rossi, where can the world find you on the internet and what you're working on?
You could find me at just Andy Rossi or at Dead Body Movie.
All right. And Andre, you get the main event spot, the closer. Where can the world find you online? Where can they follow you and find all the other stuff you're working on? And what are some of the things you're working on?
Well, you can find more about Disrupted on disruptedmovie.com. It's playing on most of the platforms, Vudu,
Amazon.
Amazon.
You can see it for free on Amazon. I don't know about the other ones, but
yeah, I think the other ones are free now too. It might still be on iTunes. I should know all this. It's like changed, like it's gone through different deals over the last year. But yeah, you can find my work on Vimeo, just Andre Welsh, or YouTube. Also, I think my handle's Andre Welsh. And I'm currently writing a feature script right now. I'm still kind of in the more, I'll say finishing up the outline, so I can't really pitch the idea yet because it's not totally solid. But I will say that Jelani Clan, who plays Jay in Disrupted, is the lead character in that.
Oh, very cool. Well, definitely keep us posted, because I definitely want to make sure that I check that one out when it comes out. I was going to say, yeah, make sure to check out Disrupted on one of the stream platforms. But I'm guessing if you're this far into the show, you've probably already seen it at this point. But still very good stuff. Everyone should tell their friends about it. Again, that does it for us. Thank you all so much for watching, for listening. 5-star reviews, comment, share, subscribes, all that good stuff. The next one's going to be 2021's King Richard before we loop back to the beginning and start all over again. That does it for us. Thank you, guys.